Redditors who work for tobacco/cigarette companies, what is the workplace culture around smoking like? Does management smoke? Is smoking among employees encouraged? Is discussion of smoking's health effects taboo? Good damn question, OOP. Thanks for posting this interesting subject. I interviewed at RJR a few years ago and everyone smoked like a chimney in their headquarters. Maybe he was on a train to Bangkok. The Thailand Express? My GF's mom works in the office side of a smaller manufacturing facility. The offices do have a smoking area, but you are not allowed to smoke wherever. She does get a free carton or two here and there. My uncle, who has been working for a much larger company in the corporate side, has told me in the HQ offices there are ashtrays on every desk and smoking there is just like in the 60s. It's not necessarily encouraged, but it is just the culture. Used to have meetings at Altria's offices in Washington, D.C. all the time. On the boardroom table were just huge centerpieces of cigs and dip. Everybody always lit up. I don't care if you never smoked, when you went there you had a cigarette during the meeting. It was one of the last indoor places I know of you could smoke in D.C. But smoking is bad for you and you should totally never do it, okay? Good. I worked briefly at the corporate headquarters of a major tobacco company in the 90s. I was a smoker at the time, quit in 2010, thankfully, and we were allowed to smoke at our desks. Most of my neighbors were non-smokers, so I usually refrained until break time. Ultimately, a manager noticed me smoking in the lobby and I got a mild scolding for letting people discourage me from smoking. After that, I would have one at my desk occasionally for appearances, or when I was stressed. We got a free carton of smokes each payday, twice per month. My preferred brand happened to be a competitor's product, so I gave them to a friend. I had to be careful not to let anyone see I was supporting the competition. An acquaintance of mine was hired on around the same time, and she worked in a secret department in a secret unmarked room. She could never tell me what went on in there, other than she handled a lot of documents. Creepy. I only lasted 6 months, partially because my conscience was eating at me, and also because they forced the entire staff to get on buses and go to a nearby city to protest an appearance by then President Clinton. As a staunch Democrat, I was appalled. As an American, I was offended that I was being coerced into political activity by my employer, and as a gay man, I was sickened by the hideous yellow polyester t-shirts we were forced to wear. I worked at a private event space that allowed smoking, and I live in an area especially good for growing tobacco. This was about 7 years ago, so their policies may have changed. There is a fairly large tobacco company located here. That company loved our space because they all smoked constantly. They could eat and smoke and drink and smoke. Cigarettes, cigars, whatever. That's it. That's all the info I got. Smoking isn't encouraged here, but it's a privilege you can enjoy. Meeting rooms usually have ashtrays, and almost every room has a vacuum ventilation system that pulls air out. In the past couple of years, it's been pretty interesting watching all the employees pick up vaping, then subsequently drop vaping to quitting for the most part. I would say maybe 5% of our company is routine smokers, another 5% are social or occasional smokers, 5% are meetings only smokers, and the rest don't smoke. Management smokes the most out of all of the groups though, and on the health effects. Not really. You know what you are getting into and it's all laid out for you when you apply for the job. Meetings only smokers. It's a thing. Especially when meeting with vendors who bring a brick of their product to hand out, haha. I live in Tobaccoville, North Carolina, where RJR Tobacco Company is located. In our tiny ass town, tobacco is king. Your grandpa worked for M, your uncle did, your cousins, your mom, and eventually you worked there as well. I remember when they first outlawed smoking in restaurants. I was in high school working at a little country barbecue house that was a fave of the locals. When RJR let out for lunch, most employees flocked to our restaurant daily and would eat together and smoke at the table. Tobacco is a way of life for these people. I mean, it fed them as kids and is now feeding their kids. The restaurant ended up getting a lot of flack. BC we followed the law and stopped allowing smoking inside. That year was the worst for that restaurant. We lost so many customers BC they truly thought they could protest a law and we would oblige. My grandmother worked there and never smoked a day in her life, but she always got the free cartons of cigs to give to her sons. I wonder if they have tobacco surcharges on their insurance. My grandfather was a tobacco farmer for his whole life. Does that count? He hated cigarettes. I would say it was encouraged. I worked for a major tobacco company for 5 years back in the 90s. While you were in the offices/break rooms, you could smoke all you wanted with free packs of cigarettes ready at hand. All of the interior spaces had really strong ventilation systems that would completely change out the air in an office every 3 minutes. I think that was an OSHA requirement. When you left for the day, there were racks of tax-stamped packs of cigarettes and you were entitled to take a pack every night. As my company also produced chewing tobacco, snuff, and pipe tobacco, that was freely used as well. The job paid well, and because the industry had a hard time attracting talent, the benefits were excellent. Interesting note, if any of our suppliers banned smoking in their facilities, we dropped them. That was actually part of our supplier screening process. Since a lot of them would gross millions a month from us, we would use £400,000 of adhesive a week, at $1.17 per pound, for example. That was a substantial threat. I had joined that company prior to the anti-tobacco effort, and had many interesting discussions when that spooled up. Had one on an airplane where the other person, who worked for Intel, asked me how I felt working for a company that made products that kill people. I asked her how she felt working for a company that made guidance chips for nuclear missile warheads. We didn't talk much after that. Seriously, almost every job that's not 100% altruistic can be turned on its head. Work for car insurance go, you're trying to cheat people out of their claim money. Body shop, you're trying to cheat people out of their money. Hospital, you're trying to cheat people out of their money. Health insurance go, you're trying to cheat people out of their health money. Animal shelters, you're allowing people to be irresponsible and abandon animals. Veterinarian, you charge too much money so people have to kill their pets, etc. etc. I used to work for a company that handled a part of Medicare/Medicaid, can't remember which, that if you get into an accident and get a settlement, the state, was entitled to a part of it, because the person getting the money didn't have to pay for their medical bills, and people would accuse us of stealing their money. Even though it's a part of the insurance agreement and the state, didn't take all the money that was allocated for the medical bills the state paid for. The state would get just a percentage of medical. And your lawyer could still argue us, on behalf of the state, down more. And the money would go back into the program to help pay for someone else's medical bills. No one, to my knowledge, was making money off of this. It was like a non-profit. Wow, sorry for the /rant. This thread is really making me want a cigarette, but I'm 4 years sober, haha. Glad to see I'm not the only one. Right after college, I temped for a few months in the lab of a company that made all of the rolling paper for Philip Morris. For obvious reasons, one of the most basic tenets of laboratory safety is no smoking, eating, or drinking. Not there. This was over 15 years ago, but we regularly lit up in the laboratory, alongside the machines we were using to simulate human smokers and the instruments we used to analyze the filters from those smoking machines. There's no telling what kind of inaccuracies this introduced into the data. Bonus interesting tidbit, we had a bottle of pure nicotine that was used to create standards when analyzing tobacco or tar samples. It was kept in a fridge, inside a lockbox that required 2 separate keys for opening. And each key was held by a different staff member. Why the security? Because 1 drop of pure nicotine on your bare skin will kill you faster than you can dial 911. That shit scared the hell out of me. I refused to handle the stuff, even with gloves, safety glasses, etc. I used to work for one of the major tobacco companies. Most of my co-workers didn't smoke, and while smoking was allowed in company vehicles, anyone who did was polite enough to ask before doing so. Only had one older lady who didn't care and did what she wanted. Legally we weren't allowed to ever talk to the press or comment to accounts on health effects. I had one co-worker who made a joke once in an internal meeting along the lines of, well, can I say it's not any worse than other cigs? Management did not like that. When you were at HQ there were a lot more smokers who were higher up and would straight up smoke in meetings or while presenting. In my final interview the people that interviewed me smoked during it to see a reaction too. Now this is all in more recent years. Previously it was the wild west. Free smokes, free chew, all kinds of free giveaways from Playboy lighters to ashtrays, etc. The government shut a lot of that down. The real interesting part is what will happen if/when weed goes legal nationwide. As these large tobacco companies have all of the distribution and sales force plus buttloads of money to take it over. I work for Yule and I have never hesitated to puff a fat one in my boss's face. I work at a big tobacco company. Not an executive, but adjacent to the top execs. None of them smoke. Most of management does not smoke, but a few do. A couple dip. Smoking is permitted in the cafeteria and a few select conference rooms, and forbidden elsewhere. Yes, it's acknowledged that smoking causes cancer. It was the first thing mentioned in my orientation. If you do smoke, you are allowed to scan your badge at the machine and receive 1 pack of cigarettes or 1 can of dip, moist smokeless tobacco, per day. Smokers are called adult tobacco consumers and there is never, ever any talk of getting kids or teens hooked. No employee is ever encouraged to smoke. There are resources on the website for smoking cessation, and the folks who deal with customers are expected to share these when appropriate. It's actually quite a fantastic place to work, if you don't mind that your company produces cigarettes. ETA, just read all the replies and it's all. I drove past a cigarette factory in 1986, so I figure. I was at work 4 hours ago. If you have more questions. Asking for a friend, if someone were to take a marketing role at a big tobacco company straight out of university, would it impact their future career prospects? If your friend is going to be in marketing, you should know that your actual experience isn't as important as the story you tell. Want to move into guns afterwards? Yeah, I used to sell smokes but I want to go more direct. Want to move into a vegan, gluten-free non-profit? I used to sell smokes but I just couldn't sleep at night. I want to do some good in the world. I cover the cigar industry through media and I was previously the general manager for a tobacconist chain. As far as the industry goes, I think it's assumed that most people in the industry smoke cigars. Anyone who is a dual-use person who smokes cigars and cigarettes tends to get a lot of flack about cigarette smoking. That said, for those who don't smoke cigars and are in the industry, I don't think anyone pressures them or gives them a hard time. Discussions of health topics come up fairly regularly. Careful attention is paid to actual cigar-focused studies. There's only been a handful of cigar-specific health studies in the past decade. As per above, it's generally understood that the health risks of cigars are much less than that of cigarette smoking. Part of that has to do with cigarettes being inhaled in the lungs, as well as cigars being tobacco and water only versus cigarettes that have many chemical additives. I was under the assumption that the health effects were largely the same, but because cigars are smoked so much less frequently than pack-a-day smokers, you don't see it nearly as much. Do you have any literature on the topic that's read in the industry? Greater than. I was under the assumption that the health effects were largely the same. That's the narrative that's been aggressively pushed by anti-smoking organizations, but as I mentioned, there is a limited number of cigar-only studies. Those studies show a significantly reduced cancer risk and health impact compared to cigarette smoking. Partly that's to do with the consumption method, no inhalation, but it also has to do with the casual consumption of cigars versus the addictive consumption of cigarettes. Here are 4 specific cigar-focused studies. https://jmanetwork.com/journals/germaindenalmedicine/article abstract/26725576 https://mcpublichealth.biomedcentral.com/articles/10.10015015 1617-5 https://www.nkbi.nlm.nih.gov/pub/2503314 https://www.nkbi.nlm.nih.gov/pub/289720007 Cigarettes? No. Cigars? Yes. But cigars are viewed differently than cigarettes. Cigars are a social thing. Cigars have a community and culture around them. I don't smoke anything, but I feel like cigars for most people will fall under that everything in moderation bracket more than cigarettes would. Absolutely. I know people that don't smoke at all that will still have a cigar if they go to a wedding that has a cigar bar. I'm sure some people are, but nobody ever seems addicted to them. I'm actually looking forward to some of these responses. Unfortunately, most posts that actually generate interesting responses don't get many responses. Is smoking encouraged? This was in the 80s, and so it may be different now. I had a friend who worked his way through college by working a blue-collar job at the Philip Morris plant in Richmond, Virginia. He told me that at the end of every shift the workers could pick up a free carton of cigarettes on the way out the door. A carton a day is way more than one person could smoke, so they definitely expected that some packs would be given away to family and friends. Wow, these days a carton goes for $110 where I live. If they were still doing that, it'd be a pretty valuable fringe benefit. In the Richmond area they're about $55, $60 now. 12 years ago I had to work with R.J. Reynolds Tobacco. They smoked in HQ idling, from the cafeteria to the bathroom. You think having to smell a stinky poop is bad? Try mixing it with cigarette smoke. Greater than you think having to smell a stinky poop is bad? Try mixing it with cigarette smoke. That's a smell from my childhood I never want to smell again. So glad my parents finally quit pooping when I was like 12. I worked a few summer jobs in a cigarette factory. Honestly, there were only a handful of people there that smoked, and they weren't allowed to do so inside the factory. A rule that makes perfect sense when in the context of the factory being in a desert and all the tobacco we worked with being insanely dry. Good way to start a fire, that. As for the health effects, yeah, we were sorta discouraged from discussing that topic. Some of the management staff would get outright angry over health concerns. Which I can understand, I suppose. After all, it's the livelihood for them. Just one of the reasons I chose not to return for another summer, I suppose. I had an interview at Swisher Sweets once. Employees are allowed to smoke in the facility. People actually smoke Swisher Sweets without changing the tobacco out for weed. Edit, to the stoners out there, check out hemp wraps next time you're wanting to roll a blunt. I'm partial to twisted hemp, cherry blue raspberry, but there are a lot of brands. Personally I think they're a bit smoother and I like avoiding nicotine when possible. A friend works for a very popular vape company. He said that during the interview process, the people interviewing him were constantly blowing clouds. Eventually got hired, now turned vape guy himself, and at the conferences and meetings, everyone constantly is vaping. Hey, at least Halloween is easy for them. They've already got the spooky fog. I'm curious on what the drug policies are for these companies. My aunt used to work, recruited in college, recently retired, for a big tobacco company as a chemist dealing with customer complaints. No one in her department smoked. No one. My uncle did biochemistry research for a tobacco company way back in the day. He said no one in his area would touch a cigarette with a 10-foot pole. Working in a lab with people carrying around 11 feet poles must have been difficult. I'd imagine it'd be something along the lines of, I pay you well enough not to think. It is difficult to get a man to understand something, when his salary depends on his not understanding it. Upton Sinclair. I did a sales presentation once at a tobacco company sometime in late 90s/early 2000s. It was at like 9 AM and we were somewhere in Virginia. I remember noticing when I got to the conference room there were little ashtrays set out in front of every seat at the table. When I started presenting, sure enough multiple people lit up cigarettes or small cigars. I remember seeing the curls of smoke shadowed on screen as it drifted in front of the projector, and that my eyes were stinging. That was a unique career moment. I never worked there myself, although this was a customer of ours, and I never worked at another place in the US where smoking was allowed. It's probably like those people that work a fast food joint that refuse to eat there because they've seen how the sausage is made. Wasn't there a video where Jamie Oliver showed a bunch of kids how McNuggets were made and went, now who would eat this now, and everyone raised their hand? https://u2.b/2nmzlp2shubw. Here it is. I fucking hate Jamie Oliver and his smug condescension. So glad those kids were able to flip him the bird. I'd love to do myself. I was a waiter at a Philip Morris recruitment event at a restaurant in Bloomington, Indiana. They were looking to hire MBAs from IU. Each place setting had a pack of Marlboro Red centered on the plate, and much of the night was people dismissing the research on smoking as lies. I spent 5 or so years as a tobacco-related cancer researcher. This makes me viscerally angry. You probably need a cigarette then.